As New South Wales struggles to control its COVID outbreak, the Premier has a firm strategy to get her capital out of lockdown.
We encourage you to get vaccinated as soon as possible so that we have options moving forward into September.
Vaccines are ultimately the responsibility of the feds, which may be why the PM's been singing this tune.
There is no vaccine solution that's going to do that. The lockdown is what is going to do it.
In other words, it's the other person's fault. And today, the conflicting messaging was starting to feel deliberate.
It's not a race.
This is a race.
With official advice saying an end to lockdowns is not possible until we reach 70% vaccination, the Premier has been teasing a much lower target.
When you get to 50%, 60% vaccination rates, it does give you opportunity to ease some restrictions ahead of that 70% number.
Health experts are worried the resolve to suppress the virus is wilting as the state government resists calls for a harder lockdown.
We have the toughest lockdown in the country at the present time. What is not happening is that people are not actually complying.
A very different message than the one coming from other increasingly frustrated leaders.
There's clearly a need for a circuit breaker.
We need a ring of steel around Sydney. We will finish up with the whole country locked down.
I'm reluctant to give the New South Wales government any further advice. They don't take advice.
With the love between New South Wales and the rest of the country waning, can the Delta-gripped state ever break the chain?
Bill Bartell is a strategic health policy consultant with the University of New South Wales, and he joins us now. Bill, the New South Wales government won't increase restrictions and instead is going hard on vaccines. Is that a sound suppression strategy?
Well, how can it be a sound suppression strategy? Since Delta drove right through Sydney Airport, through the quarantine arrangements there in mid-June, we've had 4,610 cases. And regrettably, we've had almost 30 deaths. The virus is not being contained in the LGA areas that were nominated when we went into this partial lockdown arrangement, and it is moving towards Penrith. And of course, we've seen it in the Hunter and Armidale. That's not a suppression strategy. This strategy is facilitating the spread of the virus around Sydney and New South Wales. Victorian stage 4 equivalent lockdowns that would have had the best chance of containing the infection and reducing it in pretty short order have never been tried in Sydney. So whatever is the idea behind the strategy in New South Wales, it's certainly not working.
Bill, if this is as tough as the restrictions are going to get, should there be any easing at 50% vaccination rate?
No, of course not. And it's very difficult to understand exactly where this 50% figure comes from. I was watching the Premier's press conference this morning. At one moment she said it's 50% double vaccinated and then corrected herself to 50% with a single shot. But whatever I think, a few hours ago, the Premier of Western Australia, Mr McGowan, made it really clear that the National Cabinet, that's all the state premiers, territory leaders and the Prime Minister, had agreed that nothing would change till at least 70% of all Australians were fully vaccinated. Now, that target is not going to be reached anytime soon in New South Wales. It's well towards the end of the year. So the Premier, I think, is speaking for all of the other leaders, including at federal level, to say that the only thing that can work now are lockdowns. Of course it's important that as many people get vaccinated as possible with Astra or Pfizer. That's imperative. But we know we have that shortage of supply. So within those constraints, we've got to get on with the vaccinations. That's a good thing. But we can't vaccinate ourselves out of the problem that is now being created in Sydney by the policies of the New South Wales government.
So under the current plan, how long do you think it will take to realistically get out of lockdown in Sydney safely?
The Premier likes to talk about the future freedoms after the end of August, but this is the future of living with COVID. I'd rather go back to the freedoms we really had from the October 2020 to the middle of June, when we could go around Australia, attend sporting events, go to the theatre and so on. They were real freedoms. But the future of living with COVID is the future we are living through now. There will be lockdowns, there will be restrictions, there will be continued incursions of Delta, particularly into the unvaccinated population. So if you want to say you open up at 50%, which I don't believe the other leaders would ever agree to, but if you wanted to do that, that means there are 50% of people who are unvaccinated. Well, what will happen to them when you open up? The Doherty Institute modelling the other day painted a very grim picture of what would happen if you opened up at 70% double vaccinated. Tens of thousands of cases or more after in 180 days and thousands of deaths. Now, that's not the future I think anybody in New South Wales or Australia wants.
Well, Bill, even if the New South Wales Premier won't give it to us straight, we always appreciate that you do. Thanks so much for your thoughts tonight.
Thanks so much, Les.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.